We live in a beautiful place, but Nevada's scenic beauty comes at a price. Most of our state is at great risk of wildfire. Hi, I'm Brent Boynton. Before we think nature unkind, we have to remember that fire was here long before we were. Over the course of time, fire has been an integral part of this landscape. Big sagebrush and dried grass in particular create a very dangerous environment for wildfire. When we put houses into that environment, they too are at great risk of burning. Fortunately, before fire starts, there are several things you can do that greatly improve the odds of your house surviving. That's what this program's all about. So please join me for a better understanding of wildfire and some property-saving tips as I present Living with Fire in the Big Sagebrush Grass Environment. As the name suggests, this type of vegetation is dominated by two kinds of plants, big sagebrush and grass. This is one of the most common types of vegetation in Nevada. Big sagebrush is a gray-green, medium-sized shrub. The grasses of this environment are of two types, perennial bunch grasses such as squirreltail, needlegrass, and crested wheatgrass, and annual grasses such as cheatgrass. A lot of housing developments have been built in this environment. You'll find examples on the west side of Carson City, at Spring Creek in Elko County, the ranchos of Douglas County, and at Winnemucca. Unfortunately, all too often, people have built homes and started living in this environment without regard to the wildfire threat. And the wildfire threat is significant. Some of Nevada's largest wildfires have occurred in the big sagebrush grass environment. On a dry, hot, windy day, the big sagebrush grass environment on level ground is capable of producing a wildfire that can travel at 6 miles an hour and generate flames more than 20 feet long. Fire behavior can be even more severe in steeper terrain. This is video of a wildfire burning in the big sagebrush grass environment.
What happened last night? When did you start to see flames?
About 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, it came over the hill over there. Started rolling down the hill.
What did it look like?
Looked like hell burning. It looked bad.
Now, if we can come over to the right here, we're going to cross back across Bellevue Toll Road, and we'll bring you over here more to the area of Lone Tree Road, and just take a look at how much is burning right here. We've got a lot of areas that are still just a lot of little spot fires burning out there, and then as we come further to the east, it would be, you can see more flames getting into some heavy brush. The bad news about that is burning right parallel with Lone Tree Road, and I do know for a fact that there are homes along Lone Tree, and those flames that you see burning right there are getting very close to some homes. So we will now divert our attention to those flames and keep an eye on them. The stuff that is burning up the hillside, it's a tragedy to see that hillside go, but fire crews are going to focus their efforts on these homes down here along Lone Tree.
Brian, I know you can't see it, but from our cloud cam vantage point, it is unbelievable how much of the hillside in South Reno is now on fire, and now moving into, of course, West Reno as well. It's amazing the size of this fire.
Fire crews are out here doing everything they can to protect these homes out here, but you can see in our live picture, there is still a lot of active flame out here, a lot of fire that is spreading very fast, very big flames. There's still enough breeze down here that is pushing those flames. The fire that you're looking at right now is burning due east. So that is burning down Lone Tree Lane, and that's the one that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Just since we've been on the air with you right now, that fire has already consumed about 200 feet of land.
All right, Brian Hickey live from the Windy Hill area. Brian, I know you'll be staying by there throughout the evening, and I appreciate your continued reports, and we will check in with you in a few minutes.
I just got the latest report from Sierra Pacific. Bob Sagan called in to let us know that at the time of the fire, when it broke out earlier this evening, 1,300 people in the Arrow Creek area lost power completely. By 9 p.m., 800 or so of those residents had power restored to their homes. But at this hour, there are still 500 homes without power, and it's going to remain that way throughout the night.
This program is designed to provide fuel management suggestions to reduce the wildfire threat to people, homes, and property in the big sagebrush grass environment. Wildfire fuel includes wildland vegetation, such as sagebrush, bitterbrush, rabbitbrush, and cheatgrass, ornamental plants in the home landscape, and, unfortunately, houses. Why is fuel so important? 3 factors control wildfire behavior: weather, topography, and fuel. Of the 3, we can only change fuel. Consequently, if we want to increase the chances of a house surviving a wildfire, our greatest opportunity lies in changing the fuel available for burning. The major fuel characteristics we want to change include the amount. Less fuel is better than more fuel. The height. Short fuel is less hazardous than tall fuel. Moisture content. Plants with high moisture content are more fire resistant than plants with low moisture content. Continuity. Fuels that are widely separated are more desirable than fuels that are close together. And finally, location. Hazardous fuels should be kept away from the house. By changing the fuels, we can change the way a fire behaves. We can keep it from starting, slow it down, cool it down, keep its flames shorter, and make it burn for a shorter period of time. All of these help a home survive wildfire. Investigations of houses destroyed by wildfire have consistently indicated that the fuel characteristics of the house and the adjacent vegetation are the most influential factors in determining house survivability. This conclusion is significant because it implies that the most important person in preventing a house from burning is the homeowner, and it's the actions a homeowner takes before a wildfire occurs that are critical. Wildfire can threaten a home in 3 ways: through direct contact by flames, through radiated heat, and by flying embers. First, contact by flames. This type of threat occurs when fuels burning near the house produce flames that actually touch the home and ignite it. Direct contact by flames is probably what most of us picture when we think of a house burning in a wildfire. The next way wildfire threatens the house is through radiated heat. Radiant heat is produced by invisible electromagnetic waves that travel out in all directions from a flame. When a house receives enough radiated heat for a long enough time, it will ignite without flames ever touching it. Sometimes radiated heat can burst windows and let burning embers get inside the house. Consequently, we must be concerned with vegetation and other fuels, even if they're some distance from the house. Radiated heat melted the vinyl siding on this house. Flames never touched the siding. The most common wildfire threat to a house comes from flying embers. If conditions are right, pieces of burning material like shrub branches, pine cones, and wood shakes from a burning roof can be lofted high into the air and carried hundreds of feet to more than a mile from the actual fire. Wind and fire whirls can carry embers. If these burning embers land in places with easily ignitable materials, like wood shake or shingle roofs, leaves and rain gutters, dry weeds, trash, or wood piles, they can start a new fire. Here's an example of a burning ember starting a fire in the big sagebrush grass environment. Fortunately, firefighters were already nearby and they tackled this new fire quickly. In this smoky picture, burning embers have landed on the roof, rolled down, and have been trapped in the rain gutter. The dried leaves in the gutter ignited. Other embers started a fire in the flower beds. The following recommendations are made to reduce these 3 threats from wildfire. The wildfire threat recommendations are presented in 3 categories: the built zone, the defensible space zone, and the access zone. Research shows that these 3 areas are important for a homeowner to manage in order to reduce the wildfire threat to the home. The built zone refers to how the house is constructed and maintained. The defensible space zone pertains to the vegetation growing near the house, including ornamental landscape plants and native vegetation, such as big sagebrush. The access zone is the area that allows firefighters to locate and arrive at a home in a timely manner. The 3 zones are shown in this photo. The built zone includes the house, the defensible space zone includes the vegetation surrounding the house, and the access zone includes driveways, roads, and signage. First, let's look at the built zone recommendations. The goal for the built zone is to improve the ignition resistance of the house. If the house doesn't ignite, it can't burn. Research has backed up what common sense suggests. Houses highly resistant to ignition can survive even high-intensity wildfires. Conversely, Homes that ignite easily can be destroyed even during low-intensity wildfires. While we are concerned about flame contact and radiated heat, we're particularly concerned with flying embers igniting the house. The most common way houses start to burn during wildfire is from flying embers igniting the exterior of the house or getting inside. Common exterior ignition sites include wood shake roofs, rain gutters filled with dried leaves, flammable materials like paper, trash, and firewood on, beside, or beneath decks and porches, and wood siding. Embers get inside the house through unscreened vents and open or broken windows. A homeowner should assume that anything readily flammable on or near the home will be ignited by flying embers. The following recommendations for the built zone are brief, generalized points. For more detailed information, contact your fire marshal. First, let's look at the roof. The roof is the part of the house most vulnerable to wildfire. It's also the best predictor of house survivability during wildfire. Houses with wood shake or shingle roofs are many times more likely to be destroyed during a wildfire than homes with fire-resistant roofs. If you have a wood shake or shingle roof, consider replacing it with a more fire-resistant roof. Fire-resistant roofing materials include composition, metal, and tile. The fire resistance of a roof is rated A, B, C, or non-rated. An A rating has the highest fire resistance. Regardless of the type of roof you have, keep it free of fallen leaves, needles, and branches. Rain gutters trap flying embers. Always keep your rain gutters clean during fire season. Check and clean them several times during the season. House vents are potential entry points for flying embers. You may have vents in your attic, foundation, and eaves. All vent openings need to be covered with 1/4 inch or smaller non-corrosive wire mesh. Do not use fiberglass or plastic mesh because they can melt or burn. The siding covering the exterior walls of a house is particularly vulnerable to radiated heat and direct flame contact. Wood products like boards, panels, and shingles are the most common siding materials. They're combustible and they're not good choices for fire-prone areas. Log homes are a possible exception. They have a higher fire resistance rating than other wood products because logs tend to be denser and burn slower than other wood products. Non-combustible siding materials such as stucco, brick, and cement board are better choices. The eaves of the house are particularly prone to ignition. As a wildfire approaches, hot air and gases are deflected off the side of the house and trapped under the eave. Eaves can also trap heat from flames directly underneath them. Heat builds up under the roof and may get into the attic. The chance for ignition is greatly increased. By covering the underside of the eave with a soffit or boxing in the eave, we make it easier for the heat to escape safely. Decks can also be potential heat traps. Since decks are often positioned on the downhill side of the house, they effectively trap heat, flames, and embers from an oncoming wildfire. The trapped heat dries out the wood decking and raises its temperature, making it more likely to ignite. That threat increases when leaves, dried grass, trash, and other combustible materials are allowed to accumulate under the deck. Preferably, the underside of the deck should be enclosed with fire-resistant materials. At the very least, the underside of the deck should be enclosed with 1/4 inch wire mesh. Keep this area free of all easily combustible materials. Windows are one of the weakest parts of a house. They usually break before the building ignites. If it's exposed to heat for a long enough period of time, glass can crack and the fractured pieces may fall away. This lets burning embers and heat get inside the house, which may lead to internal ignition. Single-paned and large windows are particularly vulnerable. In high fire hazard areas, install windows that are at least double-glazed or tempered glass. Low-emission or low-E glass may provide added protection. This glass has been coated with a material that reduces the amount of radiant heat passing through a window, even from sunlight. Windows with aluminum frames and sashes are better choices than those with wood or vinyl frames or sashes. Exterior window coverings, such as shutters, can provide added protection. Chimney and stovepipe openings should be screened with 1/2 inch or smaller non-combustible mesh or an approved spark arrestor cap. The final built zone recommendation is to keep the porch, deck, and other areas of the house free of combustible materials. Decorative items on porches like baskets, dried flower arrangements, and pine cones have been known to ignite houses when burning embers land on them. Also, keep these areas free of newspapers, exposed mail, and trash. Firewood stacks should be located at least 30 feet from the house. If the wood is stored uphill from the house, make sure that burning logs can't roll downhill and ignite the home. The next set of recommendations concerns the defensible space zone. This zone includes the vegetation growing near the house. The term defensible space refers to the area between a house and an oncoming wildfire, where the vegetation has been managed to reduce the wildfire threat and to let firefighters safely defend the house. In the event that firefighters are not available, defensible space also improves the likelihood of a house surviving without help. The defensible space zone is comprised of 3 areas: the non-combustible area, the lean, clean, and green area, and the wildland fuel reduction area. The non-combustible area lies right next to the house. The lean, clean, and green area extends out from the non-combustible area for at least 30 feet. This area is usually part of the irrigated home landscape. The wildland fuel reduction area extends out from the lean, clean, and green area and is usually where naturally occurring plants such as big sagebrush and cheatgrass grow. Unfortunately, when some homeowners hear the term defensible space, they picture a large expanse of bare ground surrounding their home. While this is certainly effective at increasing home survivability, it's unacceptable for aesthetic reasons and because it contributes to soil erosion. It's also unnecessary. A homeowner can have both an effective defensible space and an attractive landscape. The following 6 steps describe how to create an effective defensible space. The first step is to determine the size of an effective defensible space. The size of the defensible space zone is usually expressed as a distance extending outward from the house in all directions. The recommended distance is not the same for every house. It depends on the type of vegetation and the steepness of slope surrounding the home. For homes located on flat to gently sloping terrain in the big sagebrush grass environment, the recommended defensible space distance is 100 feet from the house. For homes located on slopes greater than 20%, the recommended distance is 200 feet. A 20% slope is equal to 9 degrees. It represents a 2-foot rise over a 10-foot run. Once you've determined the recommended distance for defensible space, mark it by tying strips of cloth or flagging to shrubs. This area inside the flags becomes your defensible space zone. The next 5 steps apply to the vegetation growing within this area. If the defensible space zone exceeds the property boundaries, don't work on someone else's property without their permission. It's important to note that the effectiveness of the defensible space zone improves when entire neighborhoods implement defensible space practices. Is there any dead vegetation within the defensible space zone? If so, remove it. Dead vegetation includes dead branches from trees and shrubs, dead leaves and needles that are still attached to plants draped on live plants or lying on the ground, dried grass and weeds, and dead flowers, both wildflowers growing in the sagebrush and flowers in flower beds around the house. If dead vegetation is present within the defensible space zone, remove it. Within the defensible space zone are wildland shrubs such as sagebrush widely spaced, or do they occur in a dense stand? Dense stands of big sagebrush pose a significant wildfire threat. If this situation is present within your defensible space zone, thin the stands. On flat to gently sloping terrain, individual shrubs or small clumps of shrubs within the defensible space zone should be separated from one another by at least twice the height of the average shrub. For example, if the typical shrub height is 2 feet, then there should be a separation between shrub branches of at least 4 feet. Remove shrubs or prune them to reduce their height. For homes located on steeper slopes, the separation distance should be greater. If there's a dense stand of shrubs present in the defensible space zone, provide a separation between the shrubs through removal or pruning. Now let's take that separation principle to the vertical realm. If you have trees in the defensible space, there should be a separation between the low-growing vegetation and the lowest tree branches. Vegetation often occurs at different heights or layers, like the rungs in a ladder. For For example, in this photograph, dried grass is the lowest rung, shrubs are the next highest rung, and tree branches are the upper rung. Vegetation that can carry a fire burning in low-growing plants to taller plants is called ladder fuel. In the left photo, a burning shrub has ignited the lower branches of a tree. Trees, particularly evergreen trees like pine, supply a lot of potential fuel to a wildfire. Once they're ignited, they can burn very intensely, and they pose a threat to life and to buildings. By removing some of the rungs of the ladder, we can reduce the amount and the availability of fuel. The recommended separation for ladder fuels is 3 times the height of the lower vegetation layer. For example, if the lower vegetation layer is 3 feet tall, there should be a separation of 9 feet. Prune the lower tree branches, shorten the height of the shrubs, or remove lower plants. But don't remove more than 1/3 of the total tree branches. That could hurt the tree. As an alternative, remove the lower vegetation layers. If there is no vegetation growing under or near the tree, remove lower tree branches to 2 feet above the ground. If ladder fuels are present in the defensible space area, remove them. Now, is there a lean, clean, and green area extending at least 30 feet from the house? By lean, we mean that only a small amount of flammable vegetation, if any, is present within 30 feet of the house. By clean, we mean there's no accumulation of dried vegetation or flammable debris within 30 feet of the house. By green, we mean that plants located within 30 feet of the house are kept healthy, green, and irrigated during fire season. The goals of the lean, clean, and green area are twofold. First, to eliminate easily ignitable fuels or kindling near the house. If flying embers were to land in your yard, they couldn't start a fire. Second, it keeps fire intensity low if a fire does ignite near the house. Should a fire start within 30 feet of the house, the fuels present couldn't generate enough heat for a long enough time to ignite the home. For most homeowners, the lean, clean, and green area is also the residential landscape. This area often has irrigation available, is planted with ornamental vegetation, and is regularly maintained. Consider these fire-smart tips. Within the lean, clean, and green area, remove most or all flammable wildland plants. These include big sagebrush, bitterbrush, and rabbit brush. If you want to keep a few of these as specimen plants, make sure they're free of dead wood and leaves, they're pruned to reduce the amount of fuel, and they're separated from adjacent brush fields. A flammable plant of particular concern is cheatgrass. Dried cheatgrass ignites easily and burns rapidly. Dried cheatgrass should always be removed from the lean, clean, and green area. It's fine to keep wildflowers such as lupin, phlox, and balsam root, but once the top growth dries out and turns brown, it should be removed. Desert peach and Mormon tea can also be retained within this area, so long as they're kept free of dead wood, are less than 3 feet tall, and are properly separated. When it comes to wise plant choices for the lean, clean, and green area, there's some good news and some bad news. First, the bad news. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as a fireproof plant. Any plant can burn if it's exposed to enough heat for a long enough period of time. The good news is that some plants don't ignite as easily nor burn as hot as other plants. Here are some rules of thumb for selecting landscape plants for the lean, clean, and green area. All other things being equal, shorter plants are a better choice than taller plants. Taller plants can produce longer flames, and they contain more fuel than low-growing plants. Mainly use plants that are less than 2 feet tall when they mature. When they're green and healthy, herbaceous plants like flowers, succulents, and lawn are better choices than woody plants like shrubs and trees. When they're actively growing, herbaceous plants have a much higher water content than woody plants. The higher the plant water content, the harder it is to ignite, and the more slowly it burns. However, when herbaceous plants dry out, they ignite easily. They become a fire hazard and should be removed. Many evergreen shrubs and trees contain flammable oils and resins that burn very hot. Because of this, deciduous shrubs and trees are usually a better choice for landscape use in the defensible space. There are several particularly bad choices for landscaping in the lean, clean, and green area. Juniper and arborvitae can burn very hot. Also, their dead needles and leaves tend to accumulate in and under them and are extremely flammable. They're easily ignited by flying embers. Ornamental pines such as Scotch pine, Austrian black pine, and Mugo pine are poor choices for use in the lean, clean, and green area. Scotch broom has been identified as a particularly flammable plant, as are most large ornamental grasses when they dry out. Both are considered poor choices. Good choices for the lean, clean, and green area include deciduous shrubs such as barberry and spirea. Green lawn is low-growing and has a high water content and is therefore an excellent lean, clean, and green area plant choice. However, lawn does have its drawbacks. It requires a relatively large amount of water and relatively high maintenance. Clover and conservation grasses may be good alternatives to lawn, especially if they're mown occasionally. A conservation grass particularly well suited for the big sagebrush grass environment is crested wheatgrass. Crested wheatgrass is planted in fire breaks throughout the western states. It's effective in controlling weedy species such as cheatgrass. Notice that in this picture, cheatgrass is absent from the crested wheatgrass area. Contact your local Cooperative Extension office for more information about crested wheatgrass. Flowers, including perennials, annuals, succulents, and bulbs, are good choices, so long as they're actively growing. Once they start drying out and turning yellow, dead leaves and flowers should be removed. Ground covers are excellent choices for the lean, clean, and green area. Well-maintained deciduous trees are also good choices. Plant deciduous trees so there's at least a 10-foot separation between branch tips at maturity. Emphasize the use of hard surfaces and mulches within the lean, clean, and green area. Hard surfaces include materials like concrete, asphalt, and brick. Mulches include rock or wood. Rock mulches are a great choice. Wood bark and mulches may be flammable and should be kept at least 3 feet away from the combustible house and deck materials. Wood mulches can burn, but they typically smolder and produce little, if any, flame. Ideally, you should keep them moist with irrigation during fire season. A potential problem, the propane tank is often located within the lean, clean, and green area. All flammable vegetation should be cleared from within 10 feet of the propane tank and other fuel tanks. Screening of the propane and other fuel tanks with fire-resistant materials can provide additional protection. Problem tree limbs should be removed. This includes limbs within 10 feet of the chimney, limbs touching the house or deck, and limbs encroaching on power lines. The last lean, clean, and green tip is to create a non-combustible area, at least 3 feet wide around the base of the house. This area needs to have a very low potential for ignition from flying embers. During an intense wildfire, embers may accumulate next to the house. If wood mulches are present, they may add fuel to the embers and eventually produce enough heat to ignite the house. Use irrigated herbaceous plants like lawn, ground covers, and flowers, and use rock mulches and hard surfaces within 3 feet of the house. This recommendation is particularly important for wood-sided houses. Extending at least 30 feet from the house, create a lean, clean, and green area. The last step in creating a defensible space is maintenance. Defensible space is an ongoing activity. Plants grow back, and flammable vegetation needs to be routinely removed and disposed of properly. Before each fire season, reevaluate your property using the previous 5 steps and implement the necessary defensible space recommendations all over again. The final category of recommendations pertains to the access zone. This deals with the ability of firefighters to locate and arrive at a threatened house in a timely manner. A house is much more likely to survive a wildfire if firefighters can get to it. A proper access zone also helps you and your family safely evacuate. Some housing developments are a virtual maze under the best of circumstances. Add the dark, smoky conditions of an intense wildfire, and it gets even harder to find a particular house in need of assistance or to evacuate safely. It's also important to realize that the firefighters may be from out of town and not familiar with the neighborhood. The following recommendations will help make a house more accessible to them. The home address should be readily visible from the street. The characters on the address sign should be at least 4 inches high, and the sign should be fire resistant. There should be street signs at each intersection leading to your house. These signs should also feature characters at least 4 inches high and be made of reflectorized, non-combustible material. Flammable vegetation should be removed from at least 10 feet on both sides of the driveway. Obstructions like overhanging branches should be removed to provide at least a 15-foot vertical clearance. Houses at the end of long driveways should have turnaround areas suitable for large fire equipment. Without a turnaround area, firefighters may be reluctant to place fire equipment and personnel at your home. Contact your local fire marshal for access zone recommendations specific to your area. This program described the wildfire threat in Nevada's big sagebrush grass environment and offered recommendations on how to reduce that threat. There were 3 categories of wildfire threat reduction recommendations: the built zone, the defensible space zone, and access zone. The built zone recommendations dealt with making a fire-resistant house. The defensible space zone recommendations included the management of vegetation to reduce the wildfire threat. And the access zone dealt with the ability of firefighters to locate and arrive at your home in a timely manner. Finally, it's fair to ask, will implementing all these recommendations make a difference? Based on examinations of houses destroyed by wildfire, we know the answer is yes. This graphic shows the roof and vegetation characteristics of more than 2,000 homes destroyed by wildfire in California. The gray houses had wood shake roofs. The brown houses had fire-resistant roofs. The red arrows indicate the distance of each house from flammable vegetation. The size of the flames and the yellow numbers show the percentage of each house type actually destroyed by wildfire. Notice that of the houses with wood shake roofs and less than 30 feet from flammable vegetation, 50% were destroyed by wildfire. But less than 1% of the houses with fire-resistant roofs at least 100 feet from flammable vegetation was destroyed. By being proactive and implementing the wildfire threat reduction recommendations presented in this program, a homeowner can live much more safely in the big sagebrush grass environment. Thanks for watching Living with Fire in the big sagebrush grass environment. We hope you've learned some valuable information that will help you protect your home from wildfire. For more information on how to reduce the threat, contact your local fire protection agency or Ed Smith at the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension at area code 775-782-9960. This program was produced by the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension with funding from the Bureau of Land Management through a National Fire Plan grant and assistance from KOLO News Channel 8 and the Media Center.